On December 26th, the day after Christmas of 2025, I got in my SL sedan and conducted the standard issue Maryland road trip. As usual, my only major stop during the driving was in Galesburg, Illinois, at the Amtrak station. I arrived a few hours before the soonest Amtrak was expected. I saw BNSF 87 and 88 parked on the siding by the station. Number 87, the Skagit River, is a track geometry theater car. Inside, rail engineers and executives watch movies specifically about track geometry, while ignoring the defective rails their very car rides on. Number 88, the Atchison, is a track geometry support car. It contains a super futuristic AI computer that does the actual work and is secretly in the process of taking over the entire BNSF system. This goes unnoticed by the rail engineers and executives because they are too distracted by the movies they are watching about track geometry. A real-life train finally rolled through while I was driving aimlessly about Galesburg. I missed the opportunity to capture it at a good location, but I managed to catch up with the back end. For some reason, the rear DPU had its horn sequencer stuck on. I can imagine that it has probably been blowing its horn all the way through the countryside, but even after it entered Galesburg Terminal, probably the largest rail yard in the state of Illinois, outside of whatever goes on in Chicago, the horn continued sounding for over an hour. You would think that, with the dozens of BNSF staff present, somebody would do something about it. But it wasn't until after the first Amtrak train arrived and departed that I finally heard the horn shut off. Speaking of, here's Amtrak train number 5, the California Zephyr. At about the time for the next Amtrak, there was another train, but it was not the Southwest Chief. This freight train, in fact, had delayed the Southwest Chief by about a half an hour. Normally I don't get BNSF train symbols very easily, but since -9 number 1032 with its Heritage 1 paint scheme was present, it got reported on the Heritage Unit's app. I got out of bed super early the following morning and left the hotel in Danville, Illinois. I heard a train horn on the NS Lafayette district, which I had become familiar with over the summer. I started my pursuit on County Road 1350 in complete darkness and with no plan. I knew that it was all going to be for some crummy dark video of likely a GEVO leader, but for some reason I felt like it was my duty to catch this train. The train appeared to be going 60 miles an hour, so I drove pretty far off the beaten path. I barely got ahead of it in Homer, Illinois, and set up next to the local co-op. Yeah, it's the NS 1069 Virginian. I don't know if I really succeeded or not. I mean, it's a heritage unit, but look at the video quality. Whatever, I'm happy to see this locomotive at all, and it kind of makes up for the hour I lost chasing this train in the first place. And I want to restate that I had no prior info about this train and had no idea that it was going to be led by the 1069. I filed my report and the app automatically decided that this is NS train 39N. Later in the morning, I stopped to get McDonald's in Richmond, Indiana. This was at the same location on the NS Newcastle district that I had previously filmed. I saw NS 60C during my short breakfast stop. And you know what? I think I'm going to drive home a new GMC truck. Okay, back at it again in Point of Rocks, Maryland. As a refresher, my favorite train watching spot sits on a pretty busy part of the CSX system. The Cumberland subdivision comes in from the west and turns into the Metropolitan or Metro subdivision, which goes on to Washington. The old main sub, which follows the original B&O Railroad line, splits off the Metro at Point of Rocks and connects to Baltimore. The MARC commuter train's Brunswick service runs from Washington to Brunswick and Frederick. These are the defect detectors. Unfortunately, the Broadcastify scanner in Brunswick is no longer online, so my portable radio can only hear 72.1, 33.1, and I can almost get 58.9 on the old main. The morning of December 28th is the first train. Eastbound and peeling off the Metro to enter the old main is a CSX manifest. M416 was being led by CSX 1877. Additionally, there are 2 Jeeps present in the consist. Well, as it just so happens, M416 is the next train. There is a walking path that follows both the C&O Canal and the railroad, but I just never bothered to check it out. Now is the time, and I also wanted to look at a tunnel, which I found pretty quickly. And what better train to see emerging from an Appalachian tunnel than a coal train? Not too long after that was a second coal train, CSX C769. I returned to Point of Rocks the next day, and this time in the evening.
CH-73, marking 10, 21 west 20. Left 101 route, speed clear more out. Rock, going 101. Mile. Yes, sir, Point of Rocks, 101.
On the 30th, I started the morning with an eastbound coal train. Then L-153 came to town with a BNSF locomotive. L-153 entered the old main and parked. This is because both L-153 and I-135 are coming at each other on the Metropolitan sub. Normally this is not an issue because it is a double-track main. Today, however, there is a piece of maintenance of way equipment fouling up track 2, so L-153 came to Point of Rocks in order to get off the main line and allow the intermodal to pass. Now the local can return to Metro and continue east. On time today is Amtrak 41, the Floridian. Then, local L-128 emerged from the old main and headed back to Brunswick Yard. L-153 returned, now with 2 additional locomotives, and did a turnaround on the Y so that the BNSF locomotive could lead the power back to Brunswick. Finally, I saw a new train to me, L-150, a Monday through Friday turn that grabs scrap metal from D.C. and brings it back to Brunswick. January 2nd, 2026 is the big day that I will ride the MARC train to Washington. I plan on getting off at Union Station, crossing the National Mall and the Potomac River until I finally arrive at a park on the Virginia side that has a good view of the CSX line. I arrived at Point of Rocks just before the sun rose and first saw CSX M415. Here is MARC 878, which I could have gotten on but decided to take a later train. At long last, MARC 880 arrived, and I boarded. It was a nice ride. The seats are comfortable, and the interior is clean. It is a commuter train after all, so there's not a whole lot to talk about. The first half of the ride is mostly forests and countrysides, but the scenery changed drastically as I got closer to D.C. The train slowed down as it approached Union Station. I saw several other MARC locomotives, including other MP36PHs, which is the type of engine on my particular train. They were built by Motive Power Industries and, interestingly, have been fitted with EMD 645 prime movers. There was also a MARC Siemens Charger. I didn't want to participate in any attractions. I just came to wander around the National Mall and look at the historical government buildings. I eventually made it to the bridge and walked alongside busy interstate traffic until I reached Virginia. At the park, I saw one Amtrak train on the CSX RF&P subdivision. And then it was time to start walking back. It took me 3 hours to get here, and I wanted to take the soonest train home. Back on the Washington side of the river, I spotted one freight train. I boarded MARC 873, and it sadly does not have any bi-level cars this time. I got off at Point of Rocks and waved Engine 31 and its coaches goodbye. On January 4th, I began driving back to South Dakota. I wanted to see the NS Newcastle district again. I even saw a report that suggested it would be in my best interest to do so as soon as I could. I stumbled upon the small town of Camden, Ohio, where I saw NS 60C for a second time. '60C ended up stopping on the siding because a grain train was headed in the opposite direction. I moved to a more open part of the line and saw a few more trains. That's going to be it for this video, so I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.